If I stop uploading here, you can find me via my website in the description below. Chapter 1, 1481, Joining Forces to Break the Restriction. Fellow Taoist Han, prepare to unleash your lightning-wheeled technique when we give the signal, Liu Zu instructed in an implacable voice as he hovered over the center of the giant spell formation. Han Li nodded and made a hand seal upon which arcs of golden lightning immediately began to revolve around his body. A lightning net appeared before swelling drastically, then transforming into a ball of golden light amid a resounding boom. Golden runes flew in all directions, and the golden ball hovered gently over his palm. At this point, Han Li ceased what he was doing and stood off to the side with the golden ball above his hand. Liu Zu and the others then began breaking the restriction. Liu Zu and Mu Qing both began to chant something as the treasure being controlled by several tens of high-grade demon beasts down below began to glow with scintillating light, forming a formation that instantly gave rise to a massive black hole. Boundless world's origin. Qi surged toward Liu Zu and Mu Qing in a frenzy from the surrounding air. In the blink of an eye, the two of them had been completely enshrouded in rainbow spiritual light, and their bodies shimmered as if they were a pair of divine deities. On the other end, the white-haired beauty stood in front of the 8 black shadows and brought her hands together before separating them again, producing a small pitch-black bell in the process. The bell was extremely antiquated, and there were even chips missing from the edges. Meanwhile, one of the crimson-robed figures stood atop the shoulder of the purple blood puppet, while the other descended on top of the head of the giant metallic puppet that had just taken shape. The purple blood puppet let loose a low roar and rubbed its hand together before producing a purple blood axe that was around 100 feet in length. The surface of the axe was shimmering with crimson light, and the puppet raised it high above its head with both hands, aiming it directly at the river down below. The metallic puppet also raised its giant blade at the crimson-robed figure's behest, and black light began to shimmer over the surface of the blade. At this moment, Liu Zu finally thrust a palm forward amid an explosive boom. A pillar of black light shot forth from his hand, and this one was several times thicker than the one he'd unleashed in the spatial passageway. As the pillar of light hurtled through the air, the surrounding space warped and twisted as if it were being folded in on itself. The pillar of light disappeared into the water in a flash, and the seemingly dead infernal river initially displayed no reaction. However, as the pillar of black light continued to be injected into the river, the latter finally began to change. Ripples began to appear over its surface, following which the water in the river began to rotate in a frenzy around the pillar of light, and it was only accelerating amid a dull rumbling noise. Mu Qing also sprang into action at this moment. The golden flower beneath her feet rotated on the spot, absorbing most of the nearby light before swelling drastically, transforming into a gargantuan golden mirror that hurtled directly up ahead. The mirror was several tens of feet in diameter, and before it had even come into contact with the water, it was already causing a massive commotion. Golden light flashed as the mirror sliced into the surface of the river, finally parting the water in what appeared to be a Herculean feat. A white hole began to appear at the center of the pillar of light before slowly expanding, but the water around it was tremoring violently, causing the holy to waver in an extremely unsteady manner, making it appear as if it were going to collapse at any moment. 2 loud booms erupted as a giant purple axe and a black saber projection also sped through the air. In the face of the demon monarch's combined efforts, the infernal river was finally completely parted amid an earth-shattering boom, and a chasm that was around several hundred feet tall and over 100 feet wide slowly took shape within the water. However, right at this moment, a strange noise sounded from the nearby water, following which wisps of translucent black threads appeared from within the water, then converged toward the massive chasm. An incredible turn of events unfolded. All of the astonishingly fearsome attacks unleashed by the demon monarchs suddenly dimmed, and their powers were quickly being diminished. What are you waiting for? Fellow Taoist Han, Liu Zu's cold voice sounded from within the rainbow light. The massive formation that had materialized from the surrounding world's origin Qi was rapidly shrinking while sustaining the output of the black pillar of light. The massive golden mirror that Mu Qing had unleashed was also quickly diminishing in size. It was quite clear that both of these abilities were extremely taxing on their reserves of magic power, and even with the power of the spell formation to support them, They wouldn't be able to sustain them for long. Hanli took a deep breath before flicking his 5 fingers toward the golden ball hovering over his palm. The golden shot forth high into the air as a streak of golden light. Meanwhile, Hanli rapidly pointed the fingers on his other hand at the ball of golden lightning, and a massive golden rune appeared. Following a rumbling thunderclap, gale-force winds and dense dark clouds were abruptly swept up in the surrounding area. A golden sun then appeared amid the dark clouds, and a devastating doomsday-like aura erupted from within the dark clouds. The surface of the golden sun was flashing erratically with arcs of lightning, and dull thunderclaps rang out incessantly. Hanli wore a grave expression as he chanted something in an unintelligible language, then pointed a finger toward the river. The golden rune flashed, and a pillar of golden light that was as thick as a water tank shot forth from the golden sun, striking the infernal river after just a few flashes. A dull thump erupted from the surface of the water, and in the instant that the golden pillar of light struck the water, it transformed into countless arcs of golden lightning that spread in all directions. Following a loud thunderclap, an astonishing scene ensued. All of the translucent black threads that had surfaced from the infernal river were destroyed without a trace by the golden lightning. Much to the elation of the demon monarchs, all of them hurriedly unleashed a barrage of devastating attacks into the river, and the white-haired beauty, who had refrained from attacking this entire time, also let loose a shrill screech. The 8 black shadows behind her suddenly combined their yin-chi before sending it surging toward the white-haired woman. Even though these 8 yin-amor ghost monarchs were only late spatial tempering stage beings, their combined yin-chi was still astonishingly powerful, and a massive ghostly projection appeared above the woman's head. Meanwhile, brilliant black light erupted from the small black bell in her hand, and it instantly rose into the air before expanding to several tens of feet in size. The woman then extended a finger and gently flicked it toward the air. The black bell tolled, and a layer of black light fanned out from its surface, proliferating toward the chasm that had appeared in the infernal river up ahead. A peculiar turn of events then unfolded. As soon as the black light came into contact with the chasm, it instantly transformed into a light barrier to support the walls of the chasm, thereby forming a true passageway. As Liu Zhu and the others continued their relentless barrage of attacks, the chasm deepened further into the infernal river, thus extending the passageway further and further. Hanli was quite surprised to see this, but he had to focus on controlling the golden sun in the sky to continue eradicating the black threads that were relentlessly emerging from the infernal river. One golden pillar of light after another erupted from the sun, assisting Liu Zhu and the others in their efforts. As the chasm continued to extend, the demon monarchs drew upon more of the spell formation's power to ensure that their attacks also extended to match. This was going to be the final push, and they were in the home stretch. Meanwhile, Hanli continued to inject his power into the golden sun up above, and he could only stand on the spot with a wry smile on his face. He didn't have a powerful enough spiritual sense to guide his divine lightning to strike a spot so far away with unerring accuracy. But thankfully the golden lightning was conducted by the water in the infernal river, so he only had to strike within the general vicinity of the spot that he was aiming for to eradicate all of the black threads in that area. Of course, as the chasm continued to extend, Hanli was forced to focus more of his attention on guiding the golden pillar of light deeper into the passageway. Around 15 minutes later, a dull rumbling sound erupted from the other end of the chasm. Muking was elated upon hearing this sound, and she immediately announced, "The passageway has extended all the way through." She then waved a hand, and the golden mirror flew back to her from deep within the chasm before, settling beneath her feet and reverting back to its golden flower form. All of the other demon monarchs were also overjoyed as they withdrew their abilities. All right, this passageway can maintain itself for several hours, which should be more than enough for us to pass through the infernal river. However, we still have to look out for attacks from the ghostly beings in the river, Liu Zhu cautioned before turning to the low-grade demon beasts behind them, before he continued, "As for them, how many of them make it through the infernal river will depend on their luck. Let's just focus on trying to get to the other side as soon as possible." Mu Qing and the others glanced at one another upon hearing this, and their elated expressions also faded. Meanwhile, Hanli withdrew his lightning wield technique, seeing as there was no need to continue unleashing it any longer. At this moment, all of the puppets and ghostly soldiers had gathered at the entrance of the passageway and had arranged themselves into a circular formation to protect the demon beasts at the center. There were tens of thousands of beings in total, and they took up almost the entire entrance of the passageway. The demon monarchs issued an order, and the army of puppets and ghostly soldiers flew ahead into the passageway first. The black winds that enshrouded the bodies of those yin armor profound ghosts had already dissipated at this point, finally revealing their true appearance. All of them were shriveled up corpse-like beings with glistening black armor over the upper halves of their bodies. They were wielding all types of long weapons, such as halberds, tridents, and spears, and the sections of their skin that were peeking through the gaps in their armor were all grey and drab. All of their heads were enshrouded by a ball of green ghostly flames each, and a sinister skull could be seen within each ball of green flames. All of the profound ghosts were completely silent and expressionless, and Han Li couldn't help but narrow his eyes as he appraised these ghosts from behind Mu Qing. The infernal river was rife with ghostly beings, but the demon monarchs still refined so many ghostly soldiers. There had to some kind of reason behind this. Moments later, the low-grade demon beasts that were surrounded by the puppets and ghostly soldiers were also ordered to enter the passageway. Meanwhile, the demon monarchs and high-grade demon beasts looked on with cold expressions, displaying no intentions to enter the passageway with them. In the instant that those low-grade demon beasts entered the chasm passageway, silver light flashed from black light barriers around them. Countless silver threads then hurtled through the air from all directions, and all of them were aimed directly at the low-grade demon beast, but paid no heed whatsoever to the puppets and ghostly soldiers. Chapter 1. 1482 Infernal Spirit Crystal. These silver threads were naturally none other than the strange infernal river fish that Han Li had seen soar at the beginning. All of these fish were shaped like thin and long needles, and even though they couldn't do anything to high-grade demon beasts, they are most definitely lethal to low-grade demon beasts. Mere moments later, most of the demon beasts that had charged into the passageway were punctured countless times and perished in the face of these silver fish. The demon beasts behind them were greatly startled upon seeing this, and many of them conjured up protective barriers of spiritual light around their bodies. The profound ghosts and puppets around them also began to swing their weapons through the air, keeping most of the silver threads at bay. However, there seemed to be no end to the silver threads emerging from the black light barriers. One of the crimson-robed figures let loose a long cry, and all of the low-grade demon beasts charged toward the other side of the chasm with all their might. Even though they were all low-grade demon beasts, they were still astonishingly fast when traveling at full speed. Demonic chi surged, and many of the demon beasts managed to cover a small portion of the passageway. Right at this moment, a sudden turn of events abruptly unfolded. A series of black shadows appeared from the black light barriers amid bursts of unsettling cries. Black creatures of different forms squeezed their way out of the light barriers, and some of them opened their mouths to blast forth white arrows of water, while others pounced onto the demon beasts and tore at their bodies with their sharp fangs. All of the demon beasts that were struck by the arrows of water stiffened and perished on the spot. Even those with protective spiritual light around their bodies seemed to be unable to withstand the infiltration of those arrows as black chi began to surface from their bodies, and they only managed to last a few more steps before falling dead. Meanwhile, the demon beasts that had been latched onto fanged black shadows only managed to thrash around violently for a short while before their bodies were reduced to puddles of putrid black liquid. These black shadows all had lethal poisons in their mouths, so those are yin ghosts. A blue light flashed through Han Li's eyes, and he looked on with a hint of shock in his heart. Using his spirit eyes, he was naturally able to see everything. Those black shadows were comprised of countless body parts, thrown together in all types of different random configurations, and they were all zombie-like ghostly beings without any intelligence. All they did was charge toward the living demon beasts with all their might, completely ignoring the puppets and ghostly soldiers. Of course, there were tens of thousands of low-grade demon beasts in the chasm, and they were certainly far from completely defenseless. Following a period of panic and turmoil, all of them began to unleash retaliative attacks like fireballs and blades of wind against these yin ghosts. However, much to their surprise, no matter what kind of attacks landed on the bodies of the yin ghosts, The attacks merely disappeared into their bodies without any effect whatsoever. All of the demon beasts were in a state of complete panic now. Idiots yin ghosts are unable to leave the infernal river. As long as you get to the other side, you'll be safe. Liu Zu's cold voice suddenly rang out within the passageway like claps of thunder, making the ears of the demon beasts ring loudly. Only then did they realize what they had to do, and all of them ignored the attacks from the yin ghosts as they focused wholeheartedly on getting to the other side of the passageway as quickly as possible. The distance of over 100,000 feet was covered in just a few flashes by some of the fastest demon beasts. The remaining demon beasts trudged onward under the protection of the puppets and the ghostly soldiers, and even though they suffered extensive casualties, the good thing was that they had massive numbers. As such, despite the huge number of demon beasts that perished, those actually only accounted for a fifth of the total number of demon beasts that had entered the passageway. Meanwhile, more and more low-grade demon beasts were being forced into the passageway like floodwaters by their high-grade counterparts. The scent of blood and gore quickly filled the entire passageway. All of the demon monarchs looked on from outside the passageway with grave expressions on their faces, but none of them showed any intention of offering their assistance to the demon beasts. Instead, they seemed to be waiting for something. Just as Han Li was pondering their intentions with furrowed brows, a massive black shadow suddenly descended toward the top of the passageway. The previously stable and stalwart black light barrier suddenly began to tremor violently. Following a series of resounding booms, a few massive tentacles broke through the barrier of light like giant pythons, then rushed into the passageway. With just a casual swipe, a dozen or so demon beasts were swept up before being dragged out of the light barrier into the infernal river like lightning. Those demons' beasts were devoured by the massive black shadow amid a string of blood-curdling howls, following which the huge tentacle appeared in the passageway again. The nearby low-grade demon beasts were immediately thrown into complete turmoil. "It's here, attack!" As soon as those tentacles appeared, the demon monarchs were all elated as the white-haired beauty. The two crimson-robed figures, Mu Qing and Liu Zu, abruptly disappeared on the spot amid flashes of spiritual light. In the next instant, the five of them reappeared in the section of the passageway where the tentacles had crashed through. Four of them raised their hand and grabbed the air in unison. Four massive hands constructed from spiritual light, different colors instantly materialized in a flash. Each of those hands grabbed onto a tentacle before pulling downward at once. With the combined efforts of four body integration stage beings, even a massive mountain, hundreds of thousands of feet tall, could most likely be plucked up from the ground. Following a thunderous roar and a resounding boom, the owner of the tentacles was forcibly dragged into the passageway by the four demon monarchs. It was a gargantuan ball of white flesh. It had no nose nor eyes, but it did have a huge mouth that took up most of its body. Furthermore, there were 7 or 8 long tentacles on the upper half of its body, half of which were being held by the hands of spiritual light. But the other half of those tentacles immediately thrashed violently, crashing directly toward the demon monarchs. A cold harumph sounded, following which a white streak of sword chi appeared out of thin air. Black light flashed, and the giant ball of flesh was sliced apart down the middle. A humanoid figure then shot forth like lightning, digging something out of the ball of flesh before rapidly darting back. The humanoid figure was none other than Liu Zu, who had refrained from attacking this entire time, and he was currently holding a white egg-sized crystal that was shimmering in the darkness. "We've finally got the infernal spirit crystal. With this thing, it'll be a lot easier for us to overcome that hurdle." Liu Zu nodded with a pleased expression as he examined the object in his hand. All of the other demon monarchs were also elated to see that they'd secured the crystal so easily. "Hey, there's only infernal river spirit in an infernal river, and there's no way that we wouldn't catch its attention after making such a massive commotion. It may be quite powerful, but it's no match for our combined powers." One of the crimson-robed figures cackled. The jointed attack they had unleashed just then appeared to be quite simple, but it was something that they had rehearsed countless times. Only then were they able to slay this infernal river spirit with such apparent ease. Mu Qing swept a sleeve through the air, pulverizing the oncoming yin ghosts with a streak of green light as she said, "Now that we have this thing, let's hurry up and pass through this river as well. We're lucky that nothing more powerful than yin ghosts have shown up on this occasion." No one else had any objections, and they all flew toward the other end of the passageway as streaks of spiritual light. At this moment, the high-grade demon beasts had received an order from Liu Zhu and the others, and all of them also sped into the passageway. Han Li and the golden ape followed suit. For high-grade beings like Han Li, these silver fish and yin ghosts were naturally nothing to be feared. Furthermore, they were also flying far more quickly than low-grade demon beasts. Thus, it only took them a few moments to arrive at the other end of the passageway, where they found themselves in a boundlessly cavernous space. At this point, there was still a constant stream of low-grade demon beasts charging into this space through the passageway. After a while, all of the demon beasts, as well as the profound ghosts and puppets, finally made it through the passageway. The puppet and ghost army was almost completely intact without any casualties, but a portion of the low-grade demon beasts had perished, and many of the survivors were riddled with injuries. Thankfully, all demon beasts had remarkably recovery abilities, so that wasn't a cause for concern. However, the demon monarchs paid no heed to this and were gathered together to discuss something. Meanwhile, Han Li hovered in the air, surveying his surroundings. At this moment, he was at an altitude of tens of thousands of feet, and from his vantage point, he could see that everyone was situated in a bleak, barren blank comprised entirely of black soil and dark yellow grass that was a few inches tall. The water from the infernal river formed a white sky overhead that encompassed the entire earth down below. After ascertaining their rough location, Liu Zhu flew over and ordered, "We'll proceed as we originally planned, with the yin armor profound ghost leading the way, and the puppets taking up the rear." Everyone was immediately cast into turmoil as they hurriedly reorganized themselves into the designated formation. Meanwhile, Han Li remained behind Mu Qing alongside the golden ape. Mo King was currently standing atop her giant golden flower and was situated at the center of a group of high-grade demon beasts. Liu Zhu and the white-haired woman led the 8,000 ghostly soldiers at the front, and the two crimson-robed figures were naturally allocated to the rear, where they would control all the puppets. The entire army flew through the air at a rapid rate like a massive black dragon, leaving the passageway behind in the blink of an eye. Several hours later, the army had flown out of this vast expanse of black land. Yet the sight that greeted them next made Han Li draw an involuntary sharp breath. There were stark white bones all over the ground, stretching as far as the eyes could see. All types of bones were littered over the plains up ahead, and all of them were of different shapes and sizes, clearly having belonged to many different types of living beings. The bones were all strewn haphazardly over the ground, and they appeared to have been there for an extremely long time. Furthermore, there was a putrid smell wafting toward everyone from deeper within the plains, and that made them even more uneasy. However, the army only stopped momentarily before they were led into this harrowing land of bones by Liu Zhu and the white-haired beauty. They progressed onward for close to 10 kilometers, and their surroundings were still littered with piles of bones, while the putrid odor in the air was only growing more and more unbearable. Han Li had already summoned a layer of protective spiritual light to ward off this god-forsaken stench, and blue light was flashing his eyes. He constantly surveyed his surroundings. Even though his spiritual sense was still severely restricted, he was able to see very far with his bright sight spirit eyes. All of a sudden, Han Li's calm expression stiffened, and he let loose a low cry. Chapter 1, 1483 Fierce Battle. Mu Qing turned her head to the side at almost the exact same moment, and a peculiar look appeared on her face. There, in the distance, a vast expanse of grey mist was visible, and it stretched for as far as the eyes could see. The white bones beneath this grey mist all rose up and formed skeletons of strange configurations. These skeletons weren't very large, but they had eyes that glowed with unsettling red eyes, and all of them turned their attention to the Earth Abyss army. In the blink of an eye, the grey mist had spread to an area that was quite close to the Earth Abyss beings. All of the low-grade demon beasts were becoming quite uneasy. Han Li's expression changed slightly, and he couldn't help but take a glance at Mu Qing, only to find that she remained completely calm and collected, as if she'd already predicted this well in advance. Just as Han Li was feeling rather perplexed, a low cry suddenly erupted from the rear. 2 streaks of crimson light then shot forth from the puppets behind him, heading directly toward the oncoming grey mist. The 2 streaks of crimson light transformed into 2 gusts of crimson winds before crashing into the grey mist. A string of resounding booms rang out as the crimson winds and grey mist clashes, and both sides transformed into massive pillars of wind that rose straight up into the sky. As the grey mist and crimson winds intertwined, hordes of nearby skeletons were swept up and completely pulverized. However, the remaining troops in the skeletal army rose into the air with grey mist revolving around their bodies, hurtling toward the earthy abyss army at low altitudes. These skeletons filled up virtually the entire sky, and there were far too many of them to count. Hanli was feeling quite astonished upon seeing this. Right at this moment, the white-haired beauty at the front of the party let loose a strange cackle as she rotated on the spot. A massive ghostly shadow with disheveled hair abruptly appeared behind her, then grew to several thousand feet in size in the blink of an eye. The ghostly shadow suddenly opened its cavernous mouth to blast forth a burst of green chi, which swept up vast numbers of skeletons up above. A peculiar scene then ensued. As soon as the green chi came into contact with the skeletons, the grey mist around the skeletons' bodies dissipated, and they fell from the sky, having been completely dismantled. Furthermore, there seemed to be no end to the green chi emanating from the ghostly shadow's mouth, and in conjunction with the two gusts of crimson winds, they quickly eradicated the immense horde of skeletons. Thus, the crisis was averted even without the need for intervention from Mu Qing and Liu Zhu. Han Li couldn't help but draw a sharp breath upon seeing this. When the crimson gusts of wind disappeared, the two crimson-robed figures flew back as two streaks for crimson light. The green chi then dissipated, following which the massive ghostly shadow behind the white-haired beauty also vanished in a flash. Those were just some yin-bone monsters. They're the easiest beings to deal with in the infernal river. The things that we encounter next won't be so easy to ward off, Mu Qing suddenly murmured. She seemed to be speaking to herself, but also disclosing information to the nearby Han Li and Jin Ling, both of whom glanced at one another upon hearing this. A contemplative expression had appeared on Han Li's face, but Jin Ling's furry face remained completely emotionless. The party continued onward under Liu Zhu's command. 2 days later, hordes of strange crimson bats appeared in the air over a crimson swamp, and they began to attack the Earth Abyss demon beasts in a frenzy. Even after being torn apart or slain by the Earth Abyss demon beasts, their bodies would simply reform again and completely recover, only by killing them a few more times or incinerating them into nothingness with fire attribute techniques were they truly killed. As soon as they latched onto the body of an Earth Abyss demon beast, they would gulp down large mouthfuls of blood essence, and it would only take a few gulps to reduce their prey to a shriveled-up corpse. Some of these bats were as large as several tens of feet in size, while the smallest ones were only several feet long. The largest dozen or so bats among them had human faces and bat bodies, and they were capable of blasting crimson light out of their mouths. Any demon beast that was struck by this crimson light would instantly be reduced to dust. In fact, this light was so formidable that even high-grade demon beasts weren't able to take a blast head-on. As such, not only did all of the demon beasts spring into action to retaliate, even the 4 demon monarchs had unleashed their abilities to kill those human-faced bats. Han Li had enshrouded himself in arcs of golden lightning, and the crimson bats would be reduced to clouds of crimson chi as soon as they came into contact with this lightning. At this point, he finally understood why all the demon monarchs held his divine devilbane lightning in such high regard. The majority of ghostly beings in the infernal river were imbued with devilish chi, so his divine devilbane lightning was extremely effective against them. The Earth Abyss army was attacked by a vast number of these crimson bats, but through the retaliation from the 4 demon monarchs, the demon beast, the puppets, and the profound ghosts, the number of bats rapidly dwindled until there were barely any left. The remaining 2 or 3 human-faced bats could clearly tell that their situation had turned into quite a perilous one, and blood mist erupted from their bodies as they fled into the distance. At the astonishing speed at which they flew, they disappeared into the distance in just a few flashes. 7 days later, within a vast expanse of strange blue mist, countless black ghostly shadows took on different shapes and forms as they danced around the Earth Abyss demon beasts at the foot of the mountain. Even though they refrained from approaching the Earth Abyss army, all of them were capable of letting loose extremely unsettling ghostly cries that caused the low-grade demon beasts to sway unsteadily as their eyes glazed over, looking as if they could collapse at any moment. At this moment, a large black bell flew forth from within the Earth Abyss army, and following just a single toll of the bell, most of the ghostly shadows were vanquished while the remaining ones screeched with anguish and horror as they disappeared into the mist. A month later, in the air above a black lake, a three-headed giant with rotten green flesh all over its body stood atop the surface of the lake, wielding a massive beastbone club with its hands as it engaged in battle with a purple blood puppet, which was comparable in size to itself. Nearby, countless ghostly beings had emerged from within the lake to battle the Earth Abyss demon beasts. At this point, there were only less than 10,000 remaining Earth Abyss demon beasts, and most of them were high-grade beings. Even the ghostly soldiers and puppets had suffered severe casualties. On a certain day, a month later, Hanley raised a hand, and golden light flashed as a minotaur ghost before him was instantly sliced in half. Grey light then swept forth from behind him, sweeping toward a few oncoming bone arrows, and those arrows immediately disappeared without a trace. At the same time, he pressed a palm against the air, and 5-colored glacial flames erupted forth, reducing the 2 sinister ghosts that had appeared behind him to a pair of ice sculptures. Right at this moment, a gust of howling winds came crashing down from above. Hanley's expression changed slightly, and his body blurred as she disappeared on the spot. A massive mace that was over 100 feet in length struck the spot where Han Li had been standing a split second ago, and black light flashed as a huge crater that was several tens of feet deep was smashed into the ground. The wielder of the mace was a giant cyclops corpse with green fur all over its body, and it looked around with its single eye with a perplexed expression. All of a sudden, azure light flashed in the air above the giant corpse, and Han Li appeared before pressing a palm downward. A small black mountain appeared out of thin air before transforming into a massive mountain of over 10,000 feet as black light swirled around it, following a resounding boom. The black mountain crushed the giant corpse and also pulverized all of the other ghostly beings in a radius of over 1,000 feet. Hanley heaved a sigh of relief, and only then did he get a chance to catch his breath as well as to survey his surroundings. There were ghostly chi and murky mist surging in all directions, and even with his bright sight spirit eyes, he only had visibility for up to just over 10,000 feet. He could only tell from the astonishing flashes of spiritual light and the relentless resounding explosions that there were many Earth Abyss demons still locked in arduous combat against this ghostly army. However, he didn't know where the 4 demon monarchs were, nor whether they'd been surrounded by the infernal river ghosts. A wry smile appeared on Han Li's face. During the preceding month, the first dozen or so days were filled with battles, but the going was relatively good, and they made fast progress. However, in the second half of the month, they passed through a dozen or so areas inhabited by powerful ghosts with special abilities. Even the 4 demon monarchs were wary of such beings, and they had refined the 8,000 ghostly soldiers and over 10,000 puppets in advance to try and force their way through these areas. As for the low-grade demon beasts, there were almost none left in the aftermath of the previous battles. Liu Zhu and the others had already anticipated that this would happen, but they were still feeling rather uneasy. However, it was certainly far too late for them to turn back, so they could only continue onward, making sure to take any extra precautions that they could. On this day, the army arrived at a set of highlands that Mu Qing proclaimed didn't house any powerful ghostly beings. All of a sudden, countless ghostly soldiers converged toward them from all sides, and there were so many of them that it was as if the entire heaven and earth had been dominated by their presence. They were led by over 30 spatial tempering stage ghostly generals, and they unleashed dense yin mist in unison, surrounding the Earth Abyss army and taking them by surprise to scatter their entire formation. As a result, everyone was forced to fight on their own. In the beginning, Hanley worked together with Jin Ling and the other Earth Abyss demon beasts nearby to ward off the attacks from these ghostly beings. But this yin mist had an extremely unsettling property where one would immediately lose all sense of direction after straying even slightly too far away from their companions. As such, even with Han Li's powerful spiritual sense and bright sight spirit eyes, he still lost contact with everyone else after over a half a day of intense battle. He could only indistinctly hear the sound of battle being waged in the distance, and there were still hordes of ghostly beings charging toward him without any fear of death. Thankfully, even though there was an immense number of these ghostly beings, They were only at the nascent soul and deity transformation stages at best, and they weren't able to pose any real threat to him. After battling for a while longer, he finally managed to kill all of the ghostly beings in the surrounding area, thereby earning him a brief period of respite. However, he knew that it wouldn't take long for a new horde of ghostly beings to swarm to attack him again, and there were simply far too many of them to kill. An indecisive look appeared on Han Li's face for a moment, following which he suddenly made a grabbing motion downward, and the massive black mountain disappeared in a flash. He then shot forth as a streak of azure light toward the direction where the sounds of battle were the least intense. He had to fly out of this mist to ensure self-preservation before worrying about anything else. If worst came to worse, even though he was wary of the demon monarchs, he'd simply have to release his weeping soul beast and force his way out. Otherwise, there was a very real possibility that he could eventually be worn down and killed by these endless hordes of ghostly beings.